So I cover a lot of negative stuff on this channel, and that is just the nature of the beast. When you talk about criminal justice related issues, when you talk about the negative impacts of left-wing policies on major cities across the country, this is what you tend to stumble upon. However, I'm happy to announce that we actually do have some positive signs. We actually do have an increase in people getting it, understanding what's going on, and looking to change policy in order to provide for a better future. And we've talked about the District of Columbia in the past before. We've talked about the fact that they eased up on some criminal justice related punishments.
To the team, and we have a couple of things that I just want to lay out for all of you and on what the DC bill does. It reduces maximum penalties for offenses like murders and other homicides, armed home invasion burglaries, armed carjackings, as I mentioned, armed robberies, unlawful gun possession, and some sexual assault.
And that has led to a spike in crime going on this year. And we've also talked about the response from everyday citizens, from the people who you would think would be likely to support these kind of policies, or who these policies are allegedly aimed at supporting, pushing back against it, calling for the National Guard in order to deal with the rampant homicide in the area. Well, we have another story that's like that, where one of the major grocery stores in the southeast section of DC, Ward 8 to be specific, is ready to close. It's the last full-service grocery store in that area, and the community has actually rallied to keep this store open. But unlike what we've seen in San Francisco and in Chicago, where they blame the business for being evil, white, and racist, a machine of capitalism, they're actually pointing their ire in the correct direction, and that, of course, is against the thieves that are making this business not viable. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up. ActualJusticeWarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners on Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Tonight, concerns that crime in the region could lead to the shutdown of a local supermarket in an area already considered to be a food desert.
So one of the things that's so fascinating about this country, about the American left wing, is that oftentimes they'll point to a problem, an issue in certain communities, and completely misdiagnose what the issue actually is. So a perfect example of this is the term you heard right there, which of course is a food desert, where they talk about how there are no grocery stores in certain areas, and what they pin this down to is redlining, which was outlawed in the 60s, evil white racism, which is around every corner. But what they don't talk about is the fact that grocery stores often operate on low margins and are uniquely vulnerable to theft. It should be easy to open a grocery store in a low income area where the rent is cheaper and all of that. However, the theft, among all the other factors, seems to be the highest indicator of whether or not you will be technically classified as a food desert. So this is what's happening in DC. And again, it's a perfect example of how criminality actually leads to the consequences that the left wing often blames on evil white racism, systemic structures, the systemic systems, systematic like, because that is actually what is driving these areas into poverty and creating all these different problems.
Jim, Jacqueline, officials for years have been warning about the food desert issues in Southeast D.C., and they affirmed this today, saying that this supermarket here, the Giant on Alabama Avenue, is the only full-service supermarket in Ward 8 that is east of the river. This impacts the community's health when you're talking about fresh produce, goods, and also pharmacy, medicine, because there is a pharmacy here.
So you have this reporter standing out in the parking lot of the last full-service grocery store in Ward 8, this side of the river, which serves this community not only as their access point for fresh produce, low-cost groceries, but it also has a pharmacy in the area for people to get their prescription drugs.
It also impacts jobs, but take a look at the camera sitting in the parking lot here. There is an issue with crime in this area.
Now, if you're in a normal urban area, a normal urban community, you're probably used to the fact and spoiled by the fact that you have grocery stores aplenty all around you. I know, as somebody who lives in New York City, in a not particularly bad part of New York City, that there are plenty of grocery stores within a 5-minute drive or within walking distance that I can go to get whatever I want, to the point point where I have the pleasure of shopping around. If I find something that's too expensive in grocery store A, I can just go to grocery store B. And you know what? If I feel like it, I can use a membership to go to like a Costco or a Sam's Club or a BJ's in order to get stuff at wholesale prices. All of these are the advantages of living in an area that does not have an increase in crime, that does not have theft out of control. But because this urban area, despite the fact that it has the population to support a grocery store, has that crime, has those problems, they cannot enjoy this basic luxury of living in an urban area. Now, I know certain people in rural areas will drive out further for their grocery stores. That's something completely different. That's down to population. That is not due to theft. But here in these areas, you would expect there to be more grocery stores, and they just can't support themselves due to the rampant crime.
I want you to listen to what one shopper said to me. Hear her feelings when we asked her what would happen and what it would be like if this store were to close.
You're attacking the black community if you're just going to pick Alabama out of all the areas in D.C.
Now, they interviewed somebody on the street. She didn't want to show her face on camera, and honestly, I don't know what angle she's getting at. I know that the activists and the people rallying to keep the store open actually identify the problem, and that problem is theft. But this woman's statement was cut off too soon. It's a little too ambiguous, so I'm not sure if she's saying that the giant that is closing or the thieves that are targeting the giant are the ones attacking the community, but I want to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she's identifying the thieves as the problem, because that seems to be the overall tone and tenor of this community, of this rally, of this news story. So I'm hoping that this wasn't the outlier person, even though I got absolutely nothing out of what she just said to the camera right there.
Now, apparently there have been rumors that the Southeast store could close, so Wardy Councilmember Tran White held a news conference today calling on the community to make sure that does not happen. He said he did recently meet with Giant's regional leadership. His chief of staff told Fox 5 that of all the company's stores in the region, the Alabama Avenue Southeast store was one of the top 2 stores hit hardest by crime. We're told it saw over $500,000 in product loss, and that the company can't continue to sustain 20% of their sales lost through theft.
So one of the things I like about this specific news segment is that they don't just give us a number, $500,000, without the context. Apparently, that is representative of 20% of the sales at this supermarket, which is kind of insane considering that supermarkets' net income or their profit is usually around the 1 to 5%. And by the way, the items that are typically stolen, your laundry detergent, your deodorant, your hair products, and all that, those are the things that they actually make money on in comparison to the produce, which oftentimes they have to throw out because not enough people buy it. Even an efficiently running supermarket is going to have leftover produce, is going to have waste like that, and that's why they're expected to lose a lot of money on that. That's why they have the other things to bring people into the store, but those are the specific items that are being targeted, and you can understand under these circumstances why a grocery store like this would be rumored to be closing.
But taking from this store is really taking from yourself. We are home to a lot of senior citizens and elders who have to eat at this store. And the more we take from this store, we put the store in jeopardy of closing down.
Look, I have to give credit to this city council person, board of supervisors member, whatever the hell they call it in the District of Columbia. This guy deserves credit because he actually identified who suffers due to the fact that crime and theft in particular is allowed to run rampant. These people are stealing from their own community. These people are causing senior citizens on fixed incomes to pay higher prices. And eventually, like all the other grocery stores in the area, if and when this one closes, these people in the community are the ones who are going to have to commute further or go to delis or corner stores or little bodegas that charge higher prices in order to get their basic amenities. These are the people that are going to be hurt by this, and this is a breath of fresh air, to be honest, to see somebody proactively rallying against the criminals on behalf of the community and on behalf of the business, rather than coming out when the business is closing and blaming them as if the problem problems aren't within the consumer base and with the company.
A Giant Food spokesperson told Fox 5 in part of a statement today, "We do not have any current plans to close our Giant Food store on Alabama Avenue. However, we need to be able to run our store safely and profitably. The reality is that theft and violence at this store is significant and getting worse, not better. As a result, it is becoming increasingly more difficult to operate under these conditions."
Now, the representative from Giant said that they have no plans at this moment in order to close this store, but they have pointed out that the thefts and the violence associated with this location is a concern, and they need to be able to operate profitably if they want to actually have this location in this area. And by the way, this isn't something that is unique to Giant, and this isn't something that this store has just had the rumors about recently, because in the past, they've actually had to take some extreme steps in order to deal with the uptick in theft. So if we go to this article from way back in May of this year, what we'll find out is that theft in grocery stores, retail theft in the District of Columbia, was actually up 25% as of May 2023 compared to the previous year. And in this particular store, due to the violence and the repeat thefts, they've actually increased security measures, which again is a cost on the business, in order to compensate for the losses.
We also want to know, it's about 2 months ago, we spoke with the head of Giant, who did warn that they are spending tens of millions of dollars when it comes to both what they are losing in theft, but also the money that they're paying to increase security at their different stores. The head of Giant saying then that they really need to work with the community on this because they do not want to close their stores.
Now, a lot of people say that if a store doesn't increase security, that means they're not losing enough money to care. However, that's not the case, because it's not about whether you spend more money on security than you lose in terms of product in any given year that determines whether or not security is a viable option. Because again, we have this store in particular saying that they're recording about $500,000 worth of losses, which represents 20% of their store sales, and that obviously is enough money to pay 1 or 2 or even 5 security guards to work at this location on an annual basis. However, the problem that they run into is whether or not those security guards can prevent enough loss in order to justify their own payment, because you're not going to get the loss to zero, so you're going to have to find a point where you're paying a guard a certain amount and he's getting you enough return either through deterrence or capturing criminals in order to compensate for that salary. However, this store in particular has also had some other issues because they've tried to block off their emergency exits because so many criminals were trying to escape. This led to a confrontation with the fire inspector because you need to have available emergency exits in case there's a fire, and this has prevented them from being able to take the measures that they've needed. And again, it creates a kind of insane incentive where you have to either choose between being able to operate your business or being safe during a fire due to the fact that they have such rampant criminality. So even though back then it didn't seem like they were on the verge of closing stores, they were just hiring security, it seems like they're on their way to a death spiral because they can't take certain security measures. And by the way, sensibly so that you can't violate certain fire codes, but they don't know if they're going to be able to sustain this because even with the guards, it appears that the increase in theft has prevented them from being able to stay in business. On top of that, like many places across this country, they've increased what is locked up behind the display, but the thing is, criminals are very opportunistic. They'll either burn through or break through those displays, or they'll move on to steal something else, and eventually you get to the point where almost every item is behind a display, and that ends up making the shopping experience not enjoyable for your customers. And we've also seen that these certain security measures make people who are law-abiding feel unsafe, and that makes them less likely to want to shop at these stores. So you have to balance all of these factors in order to stay in business. But the thing is, if DC was actually prosecuting these criminals adequately, then the balance would be much easier to deal with. If you get the repeat offenders who are consistently stealing from these stores off the streets once you've identified them, this would solve a significant portion of the problem. Now, I've talked about this repeatedly, and I've brought up this number as it pertains to the city of New York, but I want you guys to understand that this is not unique to retail theft, and this is not unique to the city of New York, but it's 327 people that represent a third of all retail theft arrests in the city of New York. That's 6,000 plus arrests that are all attributed to this same 327 people. people. The District of Columbia is a smaller area than the city of New York, so likely you would only have to incarcerate a much smaller portion of the population in order to get out a significant portion of the thefts. Again, those 327 people represent a third of the retail thefts. Just removing them would cut the problem down by 30+%. And by the way, because these thieves have become so entitled and because they're treated like innocent Aladdins who are committing crimes that are no big deal, when you implement these half measures, when you block off the thing but you don't have enough security personnel, what ultimately ends up happening is you force these criminals to the same exit that they entered from, which becomes a choke point, and since they're entitled to steal over and over and over again, that increases violence in these stores. When people start confronting them, guess what? They fight back. So Giant, even though they did something that they thought was sensible in order to compensate for the increase in theft, now have to deal with the fact that there are more chances for violent altercations with staff and other customers because the criminals have to exit with the stolen merchandise through the very same door that they came in through. So it ends up creating a violent situation, and one of the issues that they're complaining about now, besides the theft that is taking 20% of their sales, is the fact that their employees are often under threat by these criminals. So it's good to see the city councilman come out and rally on behalf of the store. It's good to see him say it is not okay to steal from the seniors in these areas. It's not okay to force other people to pay higher prices. It's not okay to wipe our one grocery store off the face of the map just because you want something instantly and you feel entitled and you think it's your God-given right to not pay for it. And I'm hopeful this will lead to results, but unless the penalties come attached with this, I'm thinking I'm going to be reporting about this Giant store closing in the next coming year. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on my social medias. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about retail theft getting out of hand and DC trying to fight back against it. Till next time.